Hello and welcome to my Tuesday night Principles of Good Health live series, and currently doing a gut health live series. We've spoken about SIBO, and the last week and this week I'm talking about leaky gut, and I'll go on to talk about some other gut health related topics in the coming weeks as well. I'd just like to say thank you for watching these, whether you're watching them on live, whether you're watching them on catch up, whether you're watching them on my YouTube channel, Peyton Principles Natural Health, or whether indeed you're not watching this but listening to this as a podcast on my website. So thank you if you're enjoying these, and I'm helping to give you really useful information to help you take care of your health, and to give you an insight, particularly at the moment, around gut health and how important it is to take care of that as well when we're thinking about our overall health. So thank you for watching these, and do spread the word if you enjoy it, to invite others into my group or to subscribe to my YouTube channel. So tonight is part 2 around leaky gut. So last week I spoke around what leaky gut is. It's actually intestinal permeability. This isn't something I imagine you'd go along to your GP and talk about it, but we do see this in practice, particularly those like me who specialise in gut health and do a lot of testing around it, as something that is real, something that needs to be fixed, something that leads to symptoms not just in the gut but extends beyond that as well. So tonight I want to talk around how we can test for it. But more importantly for you, I guess you'd really like to know what you can do to help overcome it if you think this is something that you experience or you think you might have. But I'd just like to talk briefly around testing. There aren't loads of different tests on the market for this. The way I look at this is through the stool test that I use within Vivo, because it includes something called zonulin. So last week when I talked about leaky gut and what is it and what causes it, I spoke about these tight junctions, so that only between the epithelial cells in the gut lining, only really small particles like fully digested food should get through these tight junctions. It should be semi-permeable, not very permeable, not very leaky. And what happens is you've got this thing called zonulin, a protein that helps to keep these tight junctions in place. But if the tight junctions are breaking down, then you're going to get more of a release of zonulin. So one way that I look for this in the stool test that I use, we look at the marker for zonulin and we look to see if there's really raised levels of zonulin. So that's one thing we can do. There is another test on the market, which is a urine test, looking at when you swallow a solution of mannitol and lactulose. And the reason for that being that if the intestinal lining is permeable to a degree, then lactulose, which is larger molecules, could get through into the bloodstream from there via the kidneys out in the urine. And therefore in the urine test, if you're seeing the mannitol, which should be there, but also high levels of lactulose, that can then also indicate that perhaps this intestinal barrier is sort of breaking down a little bit, has become a bit too leaky because it's allowing lactulose to get through. Now, something else that some people may say can give an indication of leaky gut is if you were to do food intolerance testing, and sometimes I may recommend to clients, or they may be particularly interested in doing food intolerance testing, and that's a fingerprint blood test looking for IgG antibodies. And you may wonder why that may suggest leaky gut. Well, if there is antibodies raised, it can suggest that that partially broken down food is finding its way into the bloodstream that shouldn't get through. Hence, there could be leaky gut, and that's true. But I don't think it's 100% foolproof in saying, yes, there is definitely leaky gut. I think sometimes IgG antibodies can be raised that can come about through poor digestion. I wouldn't say you can completely rule out that there isn't leaky gut, but equally I wouldn't say it tells you definitively that it's there. Now, the reason why I like to use stool testing is because it gives us so much information. Because if, let's face it, if you think you do the urine test and you go, yes, I've got leaky gut, it doesn't tell you anything else about what's going on in the gut. And that's really important to know, because what's causing leaky gut to occur in the first place? What else is going on in the gut? Is there high levels of inflammation going on? Have you got low levels of very good commensal bacteria? Have you got lots of high levels of different strains of pathogenic bacteria that can be really toxic and terotoxic to the lining of the gut and get through into the bloodstream? Have you got raised levels of parasites, etc.? So you need to look at the big picture, because if you just think there may be leaky gut, or you've done this like lactulose test in urine and yes, you think there's lots of lactulose, there's leaky gut, it doesn't tell you anything else about what's going on in the gut that needs to be fixed. And let's face it, and based on my experience, there usually is lots of other things that need to be addressed in the gut alongside potentially looking at leaky gut as well. So it's really, really important to look at the bigger picture. So let's just say that based on the information I gave you last week, which talked about the signs and symptoms that you may look out for, which may be systemic around the whole body or gut related symptoms, you think there may well be leaky gut, or you may have done your own stool testing and you've seen zonulin and raised levels of zonulin, and you'd like to know what you're going to do about it. So these are my top tips of how you would go about looking at that. Well, first and foremost, you mustn't overlook lifestyle factors. And by this, I'm looking at stress. You know, stress plays such a big part in our health today, doesn't it? We're all so stressed. We've all got varying levels of stress. Some of us are more stressed than others. Some of us may think we're not stressed, but I actually think some people are actually carrying stress, but they may like to portray an outward view of actually being coping and feeling fine, telling themselves to get on with it, but there can be an underlying level of stress going on. So this psychosocial stress, we know there is this direct gut-brain link, gut-brain axis. Stress has a big impact on that and can have an influence on creating a weakened gut barrier lining and influencing what's going on with the microbiome. So we really must take care of our stress levels and do whatever we can to bring our stress levels down. So if you think you're getting really uptight and stressed, or you've got a lot of things going on in your life that you know are stressful, then think about what you can do to calm the body down. First and foremost, I always like to think about deep breathing. It's something that you can do at any time, any place. Deep abdominal breathing, where we engage the core, the abdomen, and we should be breathing in so that the abdomen expands and the diaphragm raises, and you're breathing in slowly and you breathe out slowly, and that activates the parasympathetic nervous system, which is what we want to engage. We want to get ourselves out of the sympathetic stress response and into the parasympathetic rest and digest. So what else could you be doing? You may want to do Qigong, you might want to do some Tai Chi, some yoga, going for a walk, sitting outside, reading, relaxing music, speaking to a friend that can make you laugh and make you feel better in yourself. Anything that is going to calm things down. Meditation, visualization. You've got your own tools, use them, and don't ignore those signals that are telling you that you're feeling a little bit tight and stressed, because the more prolonged we are in this stress mode, the more it's damaging so many aspects of our health and our body. But today we're talking about leaky gut, and yes, it does influence that as well. Now we need to look at inflammation, because when we've got leaky gut, there is usually most definitely an element of inflammation that's going on. So we need to think about how we can reduce inflammation in the body. So an anti-inflammatory diet is going to be removing sugars, reducing and removing grains, particularly the refined grains. And we need to be taking out processed foods, vegetable oils, and if there is leaky gut, then we really should be taking out gluten as well. We know gluten can be particularly damaging to those tight junctions, particularly if you're a sensitive person to gluten. So thinking about wheat, barley, spelt, rye, couscous, it's wheat related. So you've got to look at all those grains that are gluten rich grains. Oats sits a little bit on the sideline. It's not a gluten rich grain, but it's often produced in factories alongside gluten. And usually I'd say that one is fine to keep in. And it's very, very good if you're having a porridge. It's a very, very good soluble fibre that actually can be quite soothing to the gut. But be very careful of the gluten-rich grains. And you want to increase anti-inflammatory compounds. Now, the one I particularly love is curcumin, which is found in turmeric. And what can be really lovely and soothing is making this drink called golden milk, which is made with turmeric, possibly a little bit of ginger, made with a little bit of coconut oil, because the fats help the absorption of curcumin. It's very hard to absorb curcumin from the gut and into the bloodstream. So you might want to make it with a little bit of coconut oil and with a nut milk. I tend to avoid dairy, and you can make a really lovely, warming, soothing drink called golden milk, and you can drink that at any time. Always include turmeric in your cooking if you love it. It's just the most wonderful anti-inflammatory food and has so much research to show how beneficial it is in an anti-inflammatory way for the gut and for inflammatory bowel disease conditions. So turmeric would definitely be my number one to think about. And second is, don't ever ignore the oily fish. Those essential fats, EPA and DHA, that we find in oily fish like salmon, mackerel and sardines, we really need to include those in our diet. If you don't include them in diet, you need to think about supplementing fish oils with high levels of EPA and DHA. It's not just about the omega-3. Plant compounds that can help with inflammation are polyphenols and flavonoids. So we can think about apples. I love to make and recommend to clients to make a lovely, soothing, no sugar-based apple puree. It's really, really good at feeding the good gut bacteria. Very, very soothing on the gut walls. So apple puree, berries, the dark berries, rich in polyphenols, and green tea as well. Green tea has its benefits and potentially has its negatives in the fact that green tea is also high in caffeine. But I think some really good quality green tea is a good thing to be including in your diet. Now, gut healing nutrients are really important to include. Zinc is an excellent gut healing nutrient that we find in shellfish, we find it in meats, we find it in eggs, and in certain nuts and seeds. So do make sure you've got plenty of zinc. I find many people are likely to be deficient in zinc. They don't get enough zinc into their diet. Another compound nutrient that's really known and well researched for helping leaky gut is L-Glutamine, because it's a fuel for the epithelial cells, and the epithelial cells break down every few days anyway, and of course we need to make sure these epithelial cells are formed to help keep these the gut barrier strong. So L-Glutamine and zinc are very important, but there are other nutrients that are also important, like vitamin A, vitamin C, vitamin D, vitamin E, selenium and magnesium, also of course zinc, and therefore a really good quality multivitamin and mineral with really good levels of those nutrients. Often you may find a multi is just the RDA levels, and you're likely to need a little bit more than that of some of these nutrients. So do take care and have a look and take a good quality multivitamin and mineral. Now, finally, I want to talk about pre and probiotics. How could I talk about gut, any aspect of gut support and gut healing, if we're not going to include a short discussion around the pre and probiotics? So just to remind you all, if you don't know, probiotics are the ones that supply the beneficial bacteria, and prebiotics are the fuel and the fibers that feed the good bacteria. It's really important to think about including both in your diet, and there's more and more research around these prebiotic fibers. Now, there is such an abundance, aren't there, of probiotics on the market. What on earth do you choose? And I'm not going to say there is one over and above everything else to consider. There's a lot of research around lactobacillus rhamnosus, huge amount of research around that for the gut. So that might be something to consider. But equally, the other research would say to think about a broad spectrum probiotic with lots of different strains. And, you know, unless you know what's going on in the gut, unless you've done stool testing that identifies if you're very depleted in the gut bacteria, which ones you're depleted in, it's very, very difficult to say what you should take. But a good quality probiotic with 20 billion flora, maybe a multi-strain one, might be the one to go for. And I'd recommend taking that probably for about 3 months if you don't really know what's going on. It's going to be good maintenance anyway. It's not going to do you any harm, and it's only going to provide good support for the gut overall. So think about the probiotic. Now, when it comes to a prebiotic, as I said, this is to do with the fuel that feeds the gut bacteria. We are now moving into supplements that provide specific strains of prebiotics, but it really, you need to know a little bit more about what you actually need before choosing those, and what else is going on in the gut. But at the end of the day, prebiotic fibers are going to come from your plant food. So make sure there's an abundance of plant food in your diet, lots of diverse ranges of vegetables. And if we're thinking about leaky gut, at this stage, I would advise you to have well-cooked vegetables. What you don't want is to be eating lots of raw vegetables that are very hard to digest. You've got those tough plant cell walls that can put an additional strain on the gut, and especially on the gut lining and the gut barrier. So unless you, so if we're thinking here about potential leaky gut, I would say have well cooked. Doesn't mean soggy, but don't be just thinking eating salad is just going to be all you need, because plant foods are tough. Some are tougher than others. Thinking about your kale with those tough stems, you know, be very careful choosing your vegetables, but just make sure they're cooked. You know, steamed vegetables may be sufficient, roasted vegetables may be okay. I'm not saying take out raw salads altogether, but don't think raw salad alone is going to be sufficient, because you want to make sure that you're able to digest and break down those tough plant cell walls. If for nothing else, you're extracting all the nutrients from your plant food, but you want to make sure that you've got good soluble fiber, and those prebiotics that are going to help to feed the good bacteria that in turn is going to nurture the gut barrier. So with all gut disorders, there is no one size fits all. You may need to tailor make it. There are other herbal supplements on the market that can be really soothing and helpful to support the gut lining. Probably best to work with a qualified practitioner that can really help you with that. But you need to be patient with this. No one size fits all. And it could have taken you months or years for the gut to become quite damaged, potentially leaky. So don't expect things to suddenly get right in 1, 2, or even 3 months. It could take longer than that. You need to be patient. You need to listen to your body and just take really good care of it. But there are solutions out there. I hope you found this really useful. Do let me know what else you'd like me to cover. Drop me an email, DM, send me a message if you want to make it personal, or always drop a message into my group just to let me know. Hope you found that useful again today. If you're away on holiday, I hope you can catch up on this through my YouTube channel, or later on in the week. It's always recorded and it'll be in my group saved. So have a lovely week, and I look forward to catching up with you next week. Take care, everyone. Bye.